Hello, everybody, and welcome to this special episode of Atheist Republic. Today, I'm going to be talking to one of our lovely patrons, Gasian American. So, kind of the background to this discussion is several months ago, like way too long ago. I reached out to Gasian American because he had a previous discussion with Armin on Armin's personal channel about Japanese mythology primarily. And I was just so impressed by how knowledgeable he is and also how well you like communicate these concepts that are very different from the conceptualizations of different societal aspects than like what I'm used to, what I grew up with in America. And so I reached out to him and I was like, hey, I would like to understand more about this concept of saving face because it seems to be very influential and very important in the ways that people from cultures that are oriented towards that, like in the way that they interact with each other and the way that they expect others to behave, and also how, and then this also influences how different countries interact with each other and how they balance international versus domestic policies. And basically, it took until now to actually make this happen because I'm too freaking busy. So thank you for waiting. Thank you for waiting for me, Gasian American.
Yes, no problem.
And thank you for taking the time to meet with us today. Guys, Gasian American came with slides. He came with materials. I wasn't expecting this. Like, we have a PowerPoint, so get ready. I'm super excited. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. So it's not going to be like a lecture. It's just something to organize my thoughts and talk about stuff that I guess people in Abrahamic cultures aren't that well versed in. And also part of the problem is I don't know what a lot of people in Abrahamic cultures are not well versed in, because it's just like, oh, it's something that's second nature to me, and then people are like, oh, what, really, you guys do that? And it's like, yeah, we do, like, we follow, like,
obviously.
yeah, because so one of the major differences between, I guess, I don't want to say Eastern, but like East Asian culture and Abrahamic culture is that we cherry pick everything. Okay, like every person makes their own fruit salad of different ideologies that they want to follow. And it's so like cherry picking is like a dirty word in Abrahamic culture, whereas in East Asian culture, it's like, yeah, we cherry pick. Everyone cherry picks. It is just people pick different amounts based on what they do for a living and what their socioeconomic status is. And also, this says Wu Shen Dao, which means the path of the godless. Shen is kami, and Wu means no kami.
Oh, I like it.
So,
Blank name is saying he came with the sauce. Yes, we're so ready. So I think, like we were talking before the pre-show, when I was saying I think we should start with kind of just talking about what is quote unquote saving face. What does it mean? How is it structured? And then we'll get into kind of, the title of this stream. How does this influence China and Russia? Because you sent me a very interesting message about your opinion about how this has influenced that relationship. Can I start with telling you my understanding of it? And you can kind of correct me?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So my understanding of saving face is that I think all cultures have it to some degree because we're social animals and we have an interest in being respected and liked within our social tribe. Like, it's for our own survival. But I think when people talk about saving face, I think of it as a more structured or maybe explicit social expectation beyond just like, oh, I'm embarrassed and I want to prevent being embarrassed. So I was trying to find different ways that other people define it and talk about it. And I saw this video where people were giving examples of like maybe in America, like it could be seen as rude if you correct someone who has a higher status in your job than you, like more merit than you. But they, again, this is what the people in this video are saying. They're like, well, in this construction, it's more like just like criticizing someone that's older than you could be seen as like very rude because you're making this older person, this elder to you, lose face. Which I thought was very interesting because, you know, from my mindset, I'm like, well, what if that person actually doesn't know, you know? So there's so much more to it than that. But what do you think about what I just said?
So it kind of reminds me of something that actually happened to me. One of my mom's friends came over and we were talking about just whatever, and somehow it got to the apartheid state of South Africa and how he was in support of it, and how now that God, I'm not sure if you're gonna get demonetized, but he talked about how now that they're out of power, the new government in power wants to make everyone equally poor, and
Mm.
it was just such an out of nowhere statement, and I don't want to say I flipped out on him, maybe, but like it was just
It would make me have a strong reaction too.
yeah, so I had a very strong reaction where I was just like, you don't know what you're talking about. Where is this coming from? And then my mom later reprimanded me in private because she can't reprimand me in front of him. She basically said, "Hey, this is my friend. This is your uh, 长辈." In Chinese, we call it 长辈. In Japanese, it would be senpai. Uh, and in Mandarin, it would be 先辈. It's basically he's my mother's generation, and so and also a man, so I could not, correct him. It would have maybe it would have been a little bit more socially acceptable if it was a woman, but my mom is also a woman, so I'm not sure if she believes in Confucianism to the point of obey your elders, but I'm not sure if she listens to the sexism parts of Confucianism. Like she cherry picked that part out. So yeah.
So is it simply about having well, obviously well, maybe not obviously to everyone, I don't know how much other people know, but Confucianism, it's like having piety and deference to the people above you in your social stratum is of the utmost importance. So is it just about having deference towards people older than you in general, or is
Yeah.
there's more nuance to it, right?
There is more nuance to it if we're talking about specific trades. Let me share my screen real quick. Sure. Entire screen, share, and
And
so
here
do
you
you
go.
see this?
Yes.
Can you see it? Okay.
Oh,
So
interesting. Wait, can you make it? Wait, no, if you make it full screen, then you won't be able to see me. Okay, this is perfect.
okay. So we have inside people, which is like everyone in your nuclear family, right? This is your brothers, sisters, your father, and your mother, or I mean, if you're in a traditional heterosexual relationship.
Mm.
This is in Shanghainese, we call it zgani. In
Wait, can
yellow.
we just note that you refer to Shanghainese as civilized language?
Yes, of course. Um, in Yellow River Imperialist or Mandarin, if you want to be politically correct, it's Zijiren. So like these are our inside people, and this is in terms of order of importance. So then it's outside people, so like Na Dening and Wai Mian Yuan. So like notice the Na and Y prefix right here. It basically means outside, right?
Hmm.
And so, like, extended family, obviously, extended people who have the same surname as you. So, like, your father's brother's children are of greater importance to you than your mother's nephews and nieces. Does that make sense?
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
So like so then you have people outside of your county. So like we call them nadining or 外地人, basically like people from so like I would pay greater importance to people from either Shanghai or Canton because that's where my parents are from than from someone say Sichuan or Szechuan. If Sichuan is how we say it in Chinese, Szechuan is how Americans say it. And then we have people outside of your country, 外国人 or 那关宁. And then, so I just put it here because I want it to be funny. So like, I wouldn't know where Denisovans and Neanderthals would fall into this category because it's like, I mean, should we treat them as the same as people? Like, if we started counting Denisovans and Neanderthals and they applied for Chinese citizenship and are technically Chinese, should we care about them more than Chinese people living in America? You know, like
These
so
are the
like
key questions.
yeah, so like it was just me having some fun. And there's outer planet person, 那星人 and 外星人 because I don't believe in the word alien because it just sounds like so offensive, you know?
It's so otherizing.
Yeah, it's like so otherizing. Like 外星人 is like so much more descriptive, like outside planet person. Come on.
Obviously.
And so yeah, and so here I have the love spectrum, right? Down here. So under Confucianism is love according to paternal lineage. Racism is love according to ethnicity and skin tone. Moism is communism, is like love all humans equally. So like all humans. And Buddhism and Jainism is like love all life equally. So like a tree is just as important as your family dog or something like that. I'm not entirely sure, but in broad strokes, in terms, I'm speaking of broad strokes because, and this is Asian Americanism. This is my ideology. It's love based according to chosen family. So yeah.
I like that. Wait, and then I see you have some exceptions in the corner. What were the
Oh,
exceptions?
Yeah. Oh yes, sorry. I stopped sharing. So the exceptions would be sworn brotherhood in marriage. So say for example, you and I were to enter into a sworn siblinghood arrangement. Your parents would be my parents and my parents would be your parents. And it's different than marriage because we're engaging in it as equals because under a standard Confucian marriage, you give up your clan and come join my clan. In sworn brotherhood, you approach this as equals, except one is the elder sibling and one is the younger sibling. And in traditional Chinese culture, I have to refer to you as 大姐 because I'm assuming you were born earlier than I was because I'm a December baby. And you would have.
I'm your older sister.
Yes, basically. And I would, like in traditional China, this would have huge ramifications because if my parents passed away, you would have to mourn them with me for a period of 3 years, and I would have to do the same thing for you. And when we burn incense and offerings to the ancestors, I have to give offerings to your ancestors as well as my ancestors because we have the same ancestors because we're sworn brothers. Or sworn siblings because gender neutrality. So yeah.
Wait, so back in the day, was this like something that, I mean, I'm based off of the name, was this something that men would do for each other? Or is this
Yes.
like actually opposite sex couples could do this?
So men would do it for each other. I don't think opposite sex people would do it. They would just marry each other.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, so sworn brotherhood is also used in Chinese fiction as a way to circumvent the censorship laws about marriage because they can't write about homosexuality too flippantly, so they have to be like sworn brotherhood. It's also I'm blanking. It's also because in sworn brotherhood, your siblings, but it's sorry, the most famous example of sworn brotherhoods was during the Three Kingdoms era. So like when the Han Dynasty collapsed, and there were three kingdoms vying for the title of China, and three heroes came together, and they were like, we're going to restore peace under heaven, and they basically swore a brother oath to each other. So one of the reasons why the Chinese gang members are called the triads is because of those three brothers. They call themselves the triads because three people, they swear the same oath. And Guan Yu, the god of brotherhood and oaths, is this god. He there's a statue of him when you swear your oath to become sworn brothers, and it's also part of like a Chinese triad initiation ceremony.
Holy cow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, cool. Okay. So do you think there are any other aspects of this that we need to understand? I mean, in terms of what you have that you would like to share on your slides, because in one thing when it comes to my understanding of saving face, it's difficult for me to understand or appreciate is when I think or when I hear about, you know, this real deference to people who are older than you, or just sometimes it seems, again, this is just my Western mindset, like an undue deference towards just like anyone who has some authority over you. Is the major flaw that I see in it is it feels like this would majorly impede like upward accountability in an organization or in a military, in a country. And I can see that leading to a lot of problems. And I mean, there's like examples of this, like people saying this causing problems within major institutions in China.
Yeah. So I think the thing that comes to the top of my head is the end of the Qing Dynasty, where you have these black and white photos of these old ass Confucian bureaucrats being hauled in because they literally couldn't walk anymore. And the only reason that they were there was because they passed the civil service examinations like 60 years ago with the highest marks of their academy, and they have like so many years of Confucian experience. And then right next to them was like European and American people talking to them, and there were just these young people who were vibrant, who were full of energy, who were negotiating with these old I don't want to say senile, but like they were really old.
These really like damn old, near senile.
Like these really old bureaucrats, and they had to like, you know, give them deference and authority. Like the Qing government literally had to give them a deference because they were the most experienced, but they didn't have any new ideas. It's just stale old ideas over and over again. And I think there was another, I guess, opposite of this photo taken recently when Trump was in office, and Trump just had a bunch of his yes men, like old yes men, talking to a bunch of young, energized Chinese people, and they were like, "Hey, look how the tables have turned after 200 years." And I saw that circulating around. I'm not sure if someone put that there or if it had any merit to it, but it was just something that was brought up to me. What I would say is, hold on, let me share my screen real quick. Hold on, I'm not sharing. Share is so this is a structure of the Chinese Communist Party. Can you see it?
Oh yes, let's dig into this.
Yeah, so you have, this is the lowest part. So in order to be a member of the Communist Party of China, you have to pass like this battery of tests. This is from The Economist, and you would vote for your local Communist Party leaders to be your I guess, neighborhood village party committees, right? Those are the only people you would vote for. And then the top higher echelons of the Communist Party, like around here, they would conduct closed door interviews to see whether or not you could get a promotion up this ladder. In America, we would have open primaries. Take AOC, for example. She defeated an incumbent Democrat who was appointed to her district. She ran a campaign and she won. There was no closed door interviews to see whether or not, she followed the DNC's party line. She just won her primary and then won that district in like an open and free and fair election. So one of the tenets that I learned in a Chinese politics class I took back in 2015 is that you have to obey 党中央, the party central committee. I think that's how you would say it in English. And you just have to just obey the central party. And what happens is one of the methods they would use to install trust in the central committee is by blaming anything that goes wrong in neighborhood village committees and be like, you see, that local party cadre was corrupt. And then they used clan relations to give people their jobs, not like a meritocratic thing. I mean, if you have free and fair elections, you could just vote for whoever's in power. But in China, we have a 2,600-year history of taking tests, but who writes those tests? You know, like who writes those tests that you take to pass to become higher members of civilian authority? And so it's just like, so one of the ways that the Central Committee has been able to maintain power is that they just, if something goes wrong, they blame those neighborhood village committees and then just expunge them and remove them from power and then get new people in place.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like this I can see how it would help construct a very centralized civilization which has a wealth of advantages and has served China civilizationally very well. I mean, it was excelling far above other civilizations, you know, way before everyone else. It was partially because of, you know, this centralized power that just goes up to this authority. Like China has pretty much always had like just someone who sits at the top of this pyramid, right? And for many reasons, like making sure that military technology is as advanced as possible and coordinating all these different states. And but it seems like this culture of saving face or saving the other from embarrassment or shame can cripple the ability to course correct and to adapt when necessary. What do you think about that?
I definitely agree. So remember when Deng Xiaoping opened China in 改革开放 and said, hey, we're going to experiment with capitalism, but we don't call it capitalism, we call it communism with Chinese characteristics. And one of the selling points of communism with Chinese characteristics was that he basically didn't have an ideology. China is like extreme utilitarianism, and it's extreme utilitarianism. And what they do is they opened up these ports and they experimented with different types of capitalism, different types of funding models, different types of manufacturing. Like they just did small scale experiments across China and see what worked, and then they took what worked and then implemented it nationwide. So like by the time it gets to the central party committee, like when it goes to the center, technically speaking, they should have worked out all the kinks of that plan. And so then they disseminate it. So by then it's like, yeah, it is too late to course correct, but it's also, they should have already fixed all the issues with it, because they were supposed to be experimenting in these tiny little communes to see what worked and what didn't. And part of the problem with Chairman Mao was he did not do experimentation. All he cared about was, what if the people just worked really hard,
Yeah.
and then it caused people to save face, which was lie about how much food they were producing. So they just kept lying about it, and it caused this runaway lie factory, where because they were lying about how much food they were producing, the Central Committee took too much taxes. They were like, "Oh, you're producing a ton amount of food, so we're just going to take a bigger portion of that food," and then that's how people starved. And some people were so desperate they literally had to eat dirt. They were eating dirt from like this nearby temple because they thought this dirt had like healing properties or whatever, but it didn't. So, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, what happened during that time is like absolutely horrific. Oh, whoops. I opened the YouTube and I'm hearing myself talk. Okay, now I'm good. So before we move on, there's a couple of good questions from the live chat that I'd like to throw to you. So Dee is asking, can I ask what our friend thinks Americans get the most wrong about our perception of Chinese culture? It might be hard to pick one.
That is such a vague question. The idea of Chinese monolith, I know it's like it's because no society is ever a monolith, and especially when it comes to China, there are people in China who vastly disagrees with the people in power, and they can't say it openly because obviously, I'm not sure if you remember about the Three Gorges Dam. Have you heard about the Three Gorges Dam?
I've heard about it, but can you please remind me the specifics?
Okay, so they built this dam that's like 9 times the size of the Hoover Dam across the Yangtze River. And when they voted for it, everyone who was not a member of the CCP voted no. So only the CCP voted for it. Theoretically speaking, everyone should have voted with the CCP, but they didn't. But because it was a huge controversy, you're flooding millions of square kilometers. Sorry, not millions of square kilometers. You're flooding thousands of square kilometers, and 3 million people had to relocate. And it was just this massive, I guess, disagreement within China, because theoretically speaking, the Communist Party picks the leaders of the other 10 or so legally recognized political parties within the People's Republic. So technically, they should have all been in agreement, but it was controversial because the non-CCP members voted against
it. Okay. So what we get the most wrong is the idea that it's just like, oh yeah, everyone just buys in and there's no inner conflict.
Yeah, okay. There is like yeah, definitely. We'll just stick to that for now.
Okay, I think that's a good observation. And Secular Sakai is asking, how significant is face-saving culture in Chinese influenced countries like Singapore or Taiwan?
Okay, so I want to show you.
Oh, we got more slides. We got more slides.
Not slides. It's a YouTube video. It's yes, this one.
Okay.
Can you hear it?
No, we can't.
You can't see it?
We can't hear it, but we can see it.
Oh, okay. So this is basically the Taiwanese parliament having a huge fight about infrastructure spending. Word. Yeah. So they're throwing water balloons.
They have water balloons? Oh, he's going for the chair.
No, put it down.
Oh man.
And you can't hear it, but they're blowing whistles in the background. And so like These are just
Holy
fights in a
crap.
Taiwanese parliament because they want their constituents to know that we care about your infrastructure spending.
Hell yeah. We're ready to go full WWE.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. You know, I have to say, I love a good parliament fight. Parliaments around the world have some incredible fights. Oh my goodness.
So yeah. I don't know about Singapore. I don't know about
So
Singapore.
when like you're that would be an example of not face
Yes.
saving culture.
Yes, that would be an example of face saving culture impacting a country like Taiwan. Because we care about our constituencies. I will pick up a chair and put it back down because I don't want to go to jail for hurting someone.
Yeah. Okay. And let me see. I think I saw another question. Okay, so I think we need to unpack this question by blank name a little bit. And if you don't know what these things are referring to, that's okay. So he's saying in philosophy, there is a useful model of 3 different ages: the age of sincerity, living up to your societal given role; age of authenticity, finding your true self and rebelling against traditional roles; and the age of profil this is profilicity, creating a profile online and basing your identity around it. What do you think China falls under? Well, I kind of don't understand this in question entirely because these seem to refer to developmental stages of a human being, not of a nation.
Yeah, so it's impossible for China because China is just so ridiculously old. Because you're asking, these different ages, every dynasty technically had an age of this. Like where it's like every dynasty is kind of restarting the clock around this age of X, Y, and Z. I think it's better to talk about it in terms of people because when I was in Chinese culture, when you're born, given a baby name, in addition to your quote unquote true name, and your family members refer to you as your baby name. And then when you turn 20, if you're a woman, you get a hairpin ceremony where you get a hairpin and you choose your own courtesy name. So like you choose what your name is. And men, they get a Confucian scholar cap and then they choose their courtesy name. They're saying, hey, this is how I will be referred to in future. So like in the modern era, a Gaysian American would be my courtesy name because it's a name I chose for myself in my 20s because it identifies who I am. Like I'm gay, I'm Asian, and I'm American, and I'm constantly fighting between those two sides. Like I chose the color purple to represent Yankee blue and communist red.
It's very bisexual lighting, and as a bisexual, I appreciate the bisexual lighting.
Totally. And if you were an intersex person back in medieval China, just go as a man for more social credibility and power because women are kind of being a woman kind of sucks back then. But
yes, well, I mean, as it did pretty much everywhere else globally.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so well, thank you for like your explanations and really like expanding on that because I feel like I have a more firm understanding. So you sent me a message back and you said, I would like to have a conversation about Chinese face culture and why I personally don't think the People's Republic of China will invade Taiwan. It is also my personal opinion that Western reporting of Xi Jinping asking Putin to wait after the Olympics was not a green light, but an indirect way of saying no. So let's go into this Olympic thing first. So how did saving face influence the Russian-Chinese relationship in the lead up to the war on Ukraine, in your opinion?
Okay, so I guess Well, first two things. One, this is my personal hypothesis. A theory would require evidence to back it up, and I do not have the translator notes that Xi Jinping had with President Putin. So I'm not sure how President Putin sold this military conflict to the People's Republic of China and how Xi Jinping took it as. And I don't have the exact verbiage of what Xi Jinping said back to him. And so my main reason of thinking that China didn't think this would turn into this disastrous war was
Mm.
because they were the last country to evacuate their migrant students. Because if you'll remember, China was the last country that was like, oh shit, there was an actual conflict, and we still have students in China, and we need to get them out. And they were just like, oh, just put Chinese flags out and tell the Russians that you're Chinese. They're not going to attack you. And then,
Did that really happen?
yes, like,
Oh
well,
my
not
god!
Chinese flags, but it was kind of like a thing. Then it got quickly taken down because it was like, okay, it's not working. We have to like evacuate them because China was the last country to evacuate their students, and so that's why it's my like personal opinion that Xi Jinping didn't really think it would turn into this disastrous war.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also, I guess I don't. Uh, I'm not sure if Xi Jinping has the most accurate information on the political situation in Ukraine, because prior to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, um, Russia thought that Ukraine was very divided and that Ukraine would easily fall apart and, surrender to Putin and like, yay, greet the Russians as liberators. But that didn't end up happening. And so Xi Jinping could have also gotten incorrect information because he was listening to what Russia is feeding him, and Russia was
Mm-hmm.
feeding him this, I guess, propaganda of how, yeah, we have this plan to secure the heartland, and it's totally gonna work 100%. And so my main reason of saying no, if saying that, is because Xi Jinping didn't. Mm, okay, Xi Jinping, in Chinese culture, whenever we want to say no to someone, like this is also in Japanese culture, rather than telling someone no, we change the subject. We indirectly change the subject about something we're talking about, and like saying, hey, like I would ask my parents, hey, can I get this thing? And then they'll be like, 改天再说, which means we'll talk about it at a later date. And this
Mm.
pushing off of like saying, oh, just do it after the Olympics. And I'm not sure if he said do it after the Olympics or we'll talk about it after the Olympics, because there's like a fine line between the two. And US insiders would say that, oh, well, it meant China is going to support Russia. China isn't supporting Russia.
Oh
Like
no,
China,
they're not.
no, the fuck we're not. Because China's trade with the West is worth infinitely more than China's trade with Russia. Like at the end of the day, we the China has two gods, okay? Xi Jinping thought and the god of wealth, okay? And
Mm.
if you don't have wealth, then it's not gonna. Uh, but yeah, that's my personal opinion, because it's, yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. How much do you, on a personal level, I'm thinking like this whole. I remember when I was in college taking my multicultural psychology classes, and we were talking about kind of these differences or when cultures interact with each other, like what kind of happens and arises. And
Mhm,
it just reminded me of taking those classes, thinking about these indirect no's, like how
mhm,
that is just so fraught for cultural miscommunication.
yeah.
Because I'm like, oh, okay, well, they didn't. For me, I'm like, I'm expecting people like, you'll be forthcoming with me, you'll be honest, and you will tell me what you need, and I will act accordingly. Like that's how I treat people,
Yeah.
and it's like it's a much more focused on, and I kind of perceive it as like anticipating the needs or thoughts of what that other person wants, and kind of like giving a nod to it, like, and we both kind of give a nod to it, and we kind of figure out what that means and goes along. And I'm like, how does anyone figure out how anything happens?
Yeah, so there's a lot of crazy stories about Chinese dynastic scholars having these type of conversations with each other, saying like everyone's trying to figure out if this Confucian scholar supports the crown prince or is against the crown prince, and then there's like, and then it's just like all these indirect, like China has like huge dramas about these Confucian bureaucrats like talking to one another, and military generals, and being like, do you support the crown prince? Do you not support the crown prince? Which prince do you support? And then it's just like this. It's just like this. Everyone's playing three-dimensional chess against each other, and then it's just like we don't actually end up knowing what the hell is actually going on.
Everyone's reading between the lines, like,
yeah,
did I get this right?
Yeah, and then there's also like, and that's just within China. This is between cultural languages, so like Russian to Chinese to English, and then to Russian again, and then it's just like, I'm not sure if there are nerds in the live chat who can correct me, but there was this incident during the Cold War where a Soviet ambassador came to the United States and said, "We will live to see you buried," but the translators said, "We will bury you." So the intention behind the statement was to say that communism will outlive capitalism, but the news reported it as, "Oh, they will bury us." These communists on a diplomatic mission told us that they would bury us. So it's just, so China's not supporting Russia because they have zero economic incentive to do so.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of how the Olympics came into this, do you think that the Chinese gave a nod to Russia to wait until after the Olympics for the sake of having their own Olympics, like to receive all the face they could from the Olympics?
Well, the thing is, Russia invaded before the Olympics were over, and it's also because of a military. It was also because of a military reason. During early February, when the Olympics were happening, was the best time to invade because the ground was firm and frozen, so the tanks could move across. But because they waited so long, like into March, the roads kind of turned muddy, and a lot of the tanks were stuck in the mud. And so, several things. One, to answer the question, was they didn't even wait for the Olympics to be over, and the amount of time they did wait kind of cost them tactically in terms of invasion success.
Do you think they were influenced to wait because of their relationship with China?
Definitely, because China and India are one of the only reasons why the Russian state hasn't collapsed yet, because we're kind of supporting them indirectly with money to prop up a state. Like, we're the few countries that's still doing trade with them after being blockaded by Europe and NATO and NATO's allies. There's also, what am I trying to say? I forgot. I lost my train of thought. So like India is buying oil and gas from Russia at discounted prices, but because they were banned from the SWIFT system, they have to like go through all these different loopholes to try and purchase oil and gas from them. And I guess NATO is kind of upset. I guess they're not upset. They're just like giving cues about how, well, India should do what is in the best interest of India, and I guess China's also doing what's in the best interest of China. But people paint them as, oh, these Russian allies. They're not Russian allies.
Yeah. I think people are well aware that India is playing both sides.
Yeah.
And they're playing a balancing act, a very difficult one at that. How long they're going to be able to maintain that, we'll see, because they're going to be hit with a lot of pressure to go with the West, essentially. But they do have a lot of, it's within their own interest. Like, I would be stupid if I said otherwise, to not play both sides.
Yeah, China's playing both sides too. It's also because of regional stability, because if Russia is too destabilized, Russia shares a border with China. China is going to feel the effects of that destabilization in terms of both if there is a migrant crisis in Far East Russia into China, China is going to have to contend with that. Plus, Beijing has heard there were new coronavirus cases, and Beijing might enter a lockdown. Like, the lockdown in Shanghai is already devastating because they just did it all of a sudden instead of easing into one. Susanna, you're frozen. Oh. Okay, you're on.
Did I freeze?
Yes, you froze.
I'm back.
Yay! So if there is a border crisis and Russians start immigrating into China, China's going to have to deal with that, and they're going to have to deal with more coronavirus cases because China is, I'm hypothesizing China is doing better at keeping Rona down versus I think I forgot I wasn't allowed to say it.
It's okay.
No,
it's a whole mess. Like,
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I believe the Russian population is like not very vaccinated at all.
Okay.
So that'd be another huge issue. But okay, oh my gosh, there's so many things I want to talk to you about this. Which do I choose first? Because do you want to talk about how, in your opinion, like, this influences things regarding Taiwan?
Yes. Okay. So
I think so. Obviously, maybe not obviously to some people. Part of the reason why China has not gone full force behind supporting Russia the way that people had anticipated or would have expected is this contention over Taiwan. Mm-hmm. And for a long time, they've had very firm foreign policy directives regarding, acknowledging the sovereignty of other states, mm-hmm. and like non-interference in that regard. And so obviously this is a huge contradiction in that matter. Yeah. And so can you expand on that for people who might not know kind of about these nuances, and then your thoughts?
Sure. So hold on, let me see if I can share my screen again. Sure. So can you see this?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So this is the People's Republic of China. So this is China every year since the Stone Age. And so that's the Qing Dynasty. Let me just increase the playback speed. So Western Zhou, and China's just like fragmenting into, so this is the Warring States era. This is the Qing Dynasty, the first dynasty. This is where we get the name Qin from, and it was just so short. So this is the Han Dynasty, the Nan Yue. So the word Yue is actually Viet. In Mandarin we say Yue, but in Vietnamese they say Viet. So like this is the Han Dynasty right before they conquer the, I guess, northern Vietnam, because technically this area, like Shenzhen, the Chinese Silicon Valley, used to be part of northern Vietnam.
Interesting.
So yeah, and this is the Han Dynasty. This is where the name of my ethnicity comes from. So this is when they conquered into the Tarim Basin, and so like 103 BC. That's when they're like, oh yeah, Xinjiang was always part of China. This is what they're talking about. And so it's just like them conquering the Tukharistani region and the Tarim Basin. And this is actually before the Uyghur ethnicity was created through human migration.
Mm.
So yeah. So the Uyghurs originally came from somewhere up here, if I'm not mistaken. So this is the Han Dynasty. This is so the Qing Dynasty was a short-term Confucian extremist who wanted to rename everything in accordance to Confucian values or whatever. And so this is the okay. So this is the Sui Dynasty. So around this time, they built a 1,000-kilometer long canal. They pressed hundreds of thousands of peasants into hard labor to connect the Yellow River to the Yangtze River here in the south.
Oh, wow.
And so there's this pattern in Chinese history where it's like you have a brief rule of authoritarian assholes. So like followed by a more measured rule. So like the Qin dynasty was like legalism and is like really assholery, and the Sui dynasty is also like that. So like Qin dynasty, which is really effed up, and then the Han dynasty, which is like more measured, more mellow, more compassionate, and then the Sui dynasty is also like really messed up and harsh. And then after that was, and after that, whoops. And after that was the Tang dynasty, which was the second or third golden age of China, and it's when the multi-ethnic whatever happened. The Wuzhou was the first female emperor, and so fast forward, communist China. So like under the Mao era was really messed up and harsh. And now in the Deng era, it's more open and liberalized and chilled out. So like there's just like this rhyming of Chinese history where it's like first you have 10 to 20 harsh years of terrible living, and then you have like decades of more peaceful liberalizing. And I'm not sure if this was intentional, like if this is like an actual pattern in history or it's something that's promoted by people in power to justify the terrible years under Mao. So yeah, fast forward, and that's when so this is when the Mongols ruled China. So like all of this used to be part of China, and
I was a dang.
Yeah. So like we're like, oh, Mongolia used to be part of us. Like that's what my dad told me and stuff. And I'm just like, no, we were part of Mongolia. Like we were part of Mongolia. And then according to my mom, I'm a descendant of a Ming dynasty or whatever. Okay, so being a descendant of a Chinese emperor is not something to brag about. They had like 100 or so concubines. Like every emperor had like over a dozen concubines, and so it's like, of course, we're all going to be related to an emperor. Like they just had so many children.
Yeah, that's what they do.
Yeah, it's what they do. So they just had so many children, and so like right here, this part is the Russia Far East, and China kind of lost that to the Russian Tsarist Empire. Like so funny story about the Qing dynasty. The Ming were so corrupt. A general from the Ming dynasty actually opened the gates to the Great Wall to let in the Manchurians because they were like, we're so tired of this corrupt dynasty. Please remove them from power.
Please conquer me, Daddy.
Yeah, please conquer me. Please give me some authoritarian brutal stuff. So this is, So this is the Qing, and so like you can see right here, this right here used to be Russia, but sorry, is now currently Russia, but it used to be Chinese, and Tibet was technically part of the Qing dynasty, but later on, what happened was, okay. So what happened later on was Great Britain was basically saying, hey, this is a lie. You're not actually part of the Qing dynasty. This is a constitutional lie, and invaded and gave Tibet freedom from the Qing. But in reality, they were like a British, because at that time, India belonged to Great Britain. So I'm not sure. So, hold on. Okay. Damn it. Okay, so this right here, the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, this is the kingdom that there was this guy who failed the Confucian civil service examinations 3 times, and he thought he had some type of fever, and then thought he was the younger brother of Jesus Christ, and basically said, "Down with the Qing," and started a civil war that killed 20 million people.
Holy crap!
Yeah.
How did he manage to do that?
He just one, the Qing Dynasty was ridiculously inept. They were like a whole hot mess. So like he was just like, oh yeah, we're going to start a rebellion, and the Qing Dynasty just like kept pushing things off, and then was like, oh, we actually have to deal with this, and then just like so many people died because he was also like a extreme Christian. He had a lot of effed up sexist laws and whatnot, and try to destroy, I guess, Confucian's idol worship or whatever, and it also killed a lot of people. So yeah.
Damn.
So yeah, so right here, this was taken by the Russian Tsarist government, and so this green part was ceded to Russia. And actually, no, Russia and Japan were fighting over these 2 parts because Russia wanted a warm water port here in the Liaodong Peninsula, but Japan was like having a, I guess, imperialist dick measuring contest to see who gets to control this part of China. And so what happened, one of the reasons why China eventually turned to communism was because under the Bolshevik government of the Soviet Union, they actually gave some of China's land back to China. Like, whereas every other civilized, democratic, capitalist powers, they're like, well, this land belongs to us. We'll administer it better than you. Like, it was just like so condescending. But like the Bolshevik government under Lenin, it was like, these lands belong to the Chinese people, and except for this part still belongs to us. But they gave other parts. They gave other parts back to China. So like around here-ish, they gave it back. So one of the reasons why China was so pissed at the Allies after World War One was because Japan fought for the Allies in World War One, and because of their victory, the Allies gifted the Shandong province, the birthplace of Confucius, to Japan.
Oh my god.
Instead of giving it back to the Chinese. So the Chinese were fucking pissed. And so like the Allies were always talking about, oh, democracy and freedom, just not for people who don't look like us. So yeah. Oh, so this is the Republic of China. These are called cliques because they were under the under the Warlord Era. And so hold on. Yeah, so this is the Warlord Era. And so you can see here the red is the pockets of communist resistance, because the communists were actually fighting the Japanese, whereas the nationalists were like, well, the Japanese are just a skin disease. The communists are a cancer. It's better to kill the cancer first, then treat the skin disease. So,
oh my, YouTube, we are not saying this about other people. These are the attitudes of other people.
Yes, this is the attitude of Chiang Kai-shek. I forget that this is... So basically, and it was also like better to terminate the reincarnation contract of an innocent than to let a communist go free. And do you know what I mean when I say terminate the reincarnation contract?
I think I do. I
Okay.
do.
Okay, good. Okay, cool. We're talking. Okay, cool. Awesome. And so that's why this everything in green will belong to the Japanese. And so yeah, the People's Republic took power under Chairman Mao, and they fled all the way here to Taiwan.
Yes.
And also, yeah. So people forget that Taiwan used to be. They think Taiwan's a democracy. No, Taiwan was a military dictatorship. Like the superintendent of one of the buildings I used to live in. He was a Taiwanese refugee because one of his friends were like, "Hey, here's some money. Here's a fake passport. You need to leave now because your name appeared on a secret list, and you're gonna get disappeared." So he basically fled for his life. He left his wife and children behind, and he just came to America because he was about to be purged by the Taiwanese government, which was a military dictatorship because America is known for supporting military dictatorships.
Also true. So,
Yes.
for those who are not aware, all of I can't say his name right.
Chiang Kai-shek.
Thank you. All of his people went to Taiwan, and the PRC became what it is today. But both of these groups continue to claim the rightful ownership, so to speak, of the entire land masses. So theoretically, the people who control this little island of Taiwan say, actually, we also lay claim to the entirety of what the rest of the world just considers China.
Yeah.
And then China is like, okay, we have this whole area, and then we also, this island is ours too.
Yeah.
And the way that the US deals with it is with quote unquote strategic ambiguity, where that's literally what it's called, where they're like,
we're going to call it China.
We respect both of you, kind of, but we.
From what I understand,
and also the US has been like messing around with that a lot lately.
Yeah. So what we say is like they're both called China. We just don't specify which China we're talking about. So hold on. Let me share my screen again. In here we go. Whoops. So right here. So this character right here means zong. It means center, right? And this character right here means hua. Hua basically refers to everyone who's Chinese. So like Singaporean Chinese, Malaysian Chinese. Like if you have Chinese ancestry, you're a Hua. So one of the differences between Chinese Han supremacy and white supremacy. Am I allowed to say that?
Well, you already did.
Sorry. One thing I've noticed is that under Confucian law, you are whatever your father is. So if your father's Chinese, you're automatically Chinese. Whereas in white, you are what others perceive you as. So like you are judged by your skin tone, and you are more or less white depending on how other people see you. Whereas under Chinese Hua culture, you are what your father is. You don't get to be, I'm 60% this, I'm 40% this. Like, no, you are straight, point blank. You are what your father is. So I'm not sure if they're specifying it I'm not sure if they're specifying it in terms of modern. Because in China, in the People's Republic, you're only allowed to declare one ethnicity on your national identification. So you're not allowed to be like, oh, I'm mixed race. Like, no, China doesn't do that. It's like you're either Tibetan or you're Han. And I've met people who are like, oh yeah, my great grandmother is Tibetan, and I claim to be Tibetan, so I can get like a few extra points on my Chinese Gaokao exam. And so Hua is an umbrella term for everyone who lives within China, including its ethnic minorities. 人民共和国 just means, I guess, People's Republic. Like this word means country or nation, and so they're both pissing over the title 中国, which means center nation. Like it'd be like if America and Canada went into a dick measuring contest as to who's the leader of the West. I mean, the answer is obvious, but it just kind of imagine that, like they're both fighting over who's the rightful. I don't think the current DPP, the Democratic Party of China, it cares as much for this title as the KMT did, which is the Chinese Nationalist Party.
Interesting. And so over the past 2 years in particular, there's been a lot of contention over the treatment of Taiwan. Like, depending on who you pay attention to, people, are talking about the temperature being cranked up so much more than it previously had been, where the status quo of kind of like, we both claim to be this one thing and we're just going to kind of live side by side and maybe have a couple trade deals, and we're just kind of like leave it be at this like moderate temperature. Like, people are like, oh my God, it's changing. China's going to invade Taiwan. And then obviously, I mean, China is nothing if not a very intelligent and opportunistic nation. Like, they're obviously watching what's happening in Ukraine, and also how the world has reacted to Russia, what they've hit Russia with for this action in Ukraine. And what does this make you think about how this might be influencing their questions about, not their questions, their intentions with Taiwan?
So, I guess the current situation in Ukraine is reminding me of these two wars that happened. So, in 1962, China and India had a war, and I don't remember the exact causes of this war. Yeah, actually, no, I do remember. India accepted the Dalai Lama as a refugee instead of turning him over to China. So China just basically invaded India.
Damn.
And so the war lasted 32 days, and the People's Liberation, because at the time India didn't have a good professional army. Like, I know all the Indians will come after me, but it's kind of the truth. The PLA just won a civil war and had like a bunch of training against Japanese soldiers and national soldiers, so they were able to take huge swaths of territory. But at the end of the day, the Soviet Union withdrew their support for the People's Republic of China. And so China, wanting to save face, was like, well, that was just to teach you a lesson, to show you what we could really do to you if we wanted to. So they just gave up all the land that they were taken. And there were interviews about how some of the soldiers were really upset that I saw my comrades die in this conflict that you made happen, and we had to, when we have nothing to show for it other than your silly little face thing. And right here in 1979, China invaded Vietnam because this was right after the American war with Vietnam, after Agent Orange and all the crimes against humanity America conducted. So China invaded in 1979 just when Vietnam was trying to recover. And so and the war lasted 27 days, but they invaded them because Vietnam dared to accept food aid from the Soviet Union, because China had officially split. Because China had officially split with the Soviet Union because of, I think, Nikita Khrushchev for being a reformer, and China didn't like that. They were like, "Oh, well, we need to teach you a lesson, because you're supposed to belong to our sphere of influence." And so they invaded Vietnam. They didn't change borders or anything. Like, they just invaded really quickly to show that they could, and then they left. It was more about showing off as opposed to actually, like, colonizing Vietnam and taking Vietnamese land. There's also something that I found interesting in the Wikipedia page of Vietnamese history, and they divide their history by this Vietnamese dynasty and second subjugation by the Chinese. And I'm just like, oh, this is terrible. It's just like Chinese imperialism of Vietnam. As someone who's from a very China-centric worldview, I was not taught this until much later. I did not learn about Chinese attempts at Vietnamese colonization until I was like in college. And so yeah, I guess I'm just like checking all my biases, because I don't think anyone can be free of biases. You have to declare them and be aware of them.
Yeah.
Because so China basically invaded here, and here, and they just retreated because they just wanted to prove a point. They didn't want to actually take land. And so there was another Chinese fight. Border skirmish with India, because India wanted to build naval bases here in the Andaman Sea. Like these Andaman Islands, they are a union territory of India. Like they undisputably belong to India. And so India has every right to build a military base here. And this was in conflict to China's string of pearls, like right here. And so China wanted to distract them by having a land skirmish with India. So India would spend more money towards its army than to its navy.
Oh my goodness.
So the main reason why I think China didn't want an actual war with India was because I know people who were complaining about how Chinese people were not allowed to have public funerals of their dead children. Uh, of their dead children in public. Like they were not allowed to talk about it. It was just like complete hush hush. Whereas the BJP used their, I guess, public funerals to win votes in the Indian parliament. Whereas China was like, no, no, hush hush, because if they inflamed these attitudes, it might actually start a war with India that they can't afford.
So they gotta kind of like keep a lid on their own hyper-nationalism in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Okay.
like, okay, this can easily spiral out of hand and it's not going to work out. And so for my main reason, as to why China won't militarily attack Taiwan is because this is from Sun Tzu's Art of War, or Sun Tzu, if you're an English speaker, is because
If you speak the barbarian language.
yes, if you speak the barbarian language of English, but we call it Sun Tzu, and so all warfare is based on deception. So like when able to attack, we must seem unable, and so China looks like it can attack Taiwan. So because of that, I don't think they'll actually attack Taiwan. Does that make sense? Like we must seem inactive. When we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are far. And when far away, we must make him believe we are near.
Interesting. I see. Okay,
Yeah.
so from your perspective, you think okay, like if they were appearing to be unable, that's when he might be like, there's something else going on here.
Yeah.
Interesting. But right now they're projecting such an
Yeah.
image of their ability to just go in and take it. And that makes sense because that's playing into what you were saying before about these other conflicts about it was just about showing the strength and the ability to do it. And here we're seeing these exercises like the planes flying in the airspace and stuff like that, where it's just about like showing like, hey, keep yourself in check because we're letting you know what we could do.
Yeah. And so it's also a great way to drain Taiwan of its of its oil supply, because every time China flies its planes over, Taiwan has to meet with an equal amount of planes. But China is like so much bigger than Taiwan, and they have like oil reserves that are deeper than Taiwan's, so they can afford to fly those planes out, whereas Taiwan can't necessarily do so. And another point is that I guess China has collected a lot of information about America's failure in Afghanistan and Russia's failure in the Ukraine, because like Ukraine is a flat territory and Taiwan is very mountainous. So a Chinese invade, like even if say China takes all these major cities by military force, they'll have to contend with mountains. Like the closest mountain in the Ukraine is all the way here in the Carpathian Mountains near Romania and Poland. Whereas and Russia was able to invade from three sides. Like even if China were to, take these cities, they'll be contending with forces in the mountainous area. And so it's just going to be way more expensive. Also, Taiwan doesn't have natural resources to exploit. Like most of Taiwan's wealth is in its educated tax base. So even if you were to say enslave Taiwan, it's not going to work because you're not going to get riches the same way you could get out of Ukraine because because Taiwan is a, I don't want to say dirt poor country, but like it doesn't have natural resources.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
So yeah.
That's so interesting. I did see a slide that you had about the Heartland Theory.
Yes.
So let's dig into that because I'm very curious about what you have to say about this.
Okay. So the Heartland Theory is a Eurasian thinking process. So like right here, a big parts of this used to be part of the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union. They think that if they can control this piece of land, they can dictate, they can outproduce the territories in the Rimland, and by controlling that, the Heartland and the Rimland, you are in control of the world island, which is Eurasia. And by controlling Eurasia, you can basically dictate the rest of the world. That's how Russia kind of sees itself. If there's like a Russian economist who knows more about the Heartland Theory, go ahead. But that's my understanding of the Russian Heartland Theory. And it's a little bit in conflict with the Chinese One Belt, One Road, because China wants to connect these ports and these railway stations across the Eurasian continent. And part of the problem is Russia doesn't want to seem like the junior partner when it's compared to China, but it is. China has 10
100%.
Yeah, China has 10
and they're on their way to being a client state.
Yeah, basically, because China has 10 times the population, and we have just orders of magnitude more money. Like, I'm not sure what the GDP of Russia is, and since this war began, but it's not going to even compare with the People's Republic of China. But I guess it's also Russian face, like Vladimir Putin and the Russian oligarchs, they are losing face in this attempt at trying to win Central Asian nations to their cause. I think in one of your streams, you talked about how the Taliban banned opium. And
yes.
You want to know why they banned opium?
Tell us.
Because China ordered them to.
Wait, where are you getting this information?
So, so as you know, the Opium Wars were a huge no-no for China. That's like our 9/11. The Opium Wars essentially started China's century of humiliation.
Yeah.
And it was just so devastating to us. So like we hate opium and all sorts of drugs. The only drugs that are allowed in China, I believe, are tobacco and alcohol. And so like we do not waste our time with weed. We do not waste our time. Like we just, like if the Sackler family was in China, they would have had all their assets seized, and human rights violations on them.
Yeah.
And so one of the major sources, one of the major ways opium gets into China is through Myanmar and Thailand, and they source most of their opium from Afghanistan. And so I'm not sure. I haven't seen like an official communique of China ordering the Taliban to stop the opium, but I'm guessing that because the Taliban wants legitimacy and they want investments, they're like, okay, we're going to stop opium production, because opium production is a huge moneymaker in Afghanistan, but they have to stop it because China is more of an enticing partner than opium production.
Okay.
But I will send you my sources on that. I unfortunately do not have this on here because I wasn't expecting to talk about this.
No problem. I'm not like, give me your citations now.
Also, I just want to talk about Chinese Wei Chi versus chess. So the objective of chess is very obvious. It's like, oh, this knight is attacking this king, or this queen is attacking that. It's like very obvious. But in Chinese Wei Chi thinking, you're supposed to surround your enemies in different with with these stones. It's a 19 by 19 grid, and there are more ways to play Wei Chi than there are number of atoms in the universe.
Holy cow.
Yeah, so there's like just infinite different permutations of this game. And so what you're trying to do is it's very simple. Like um you just want to grab as much territory as you possibly can. And so as you can see, black is dominating here and white is like dominating here a little bit. But it's also like, do you want to spend your moves taking as much territory as possible, or do you want to spend your moves capturing small bits of territory around here? And so it kind of goes back to the Chinese One Belt One Road, because they want to build these ports and these train stations across Eurasia and Africa.
Interesting.
So yeah.
So what do you think about this dance that China is doing in terms of their own interests in the language they use about sovereignty and, respecting it and the importance of that, and then how they're they're trying to distance themselves from the Ukraine situation while still use this it's like a ballet of language that they use to talk about their rights to Taiwan, because this is a big contention that's very interesting to me.
Yeah. So, God, it's just. So they have because both countries have taken upon themselves the title of China, which is this 4,722-year-old civilization state. Sorry, 4,720-year-old, because in the Chinese calendar, it is the year 4720, in the year of the Yellow Emperor, who stopped Noah's flood with a flying dragon and magic size-changing Earth.
Okay.
And we didn't build a boat like the rest of the world, okay? The rest of the world built boats, okay? Manu and Noah built boats. We had magic size-changing Earth and dragons, okay? We're different. That's what makes us special. Like, if you don't have dragons in your mythology, what are you doing?
Okay, you have a point.
So they've both taken upon that title, and in the past, multiple dynasties and clans would try to take the title China, Central Nation, and sometimes they're successful and sometimes they're not. But the thing is that there's a third factor, which is Taiwan, and Taiwan's DPP cares about the title China less than the KMT, because it was the KMT under Chiang Kai-shek who was like, we want to restore nationalist rule over all of China. The DPP have shifted from that and it's like, we're more okay with being our own independent nation. I guess for the sake of peace and stability, they go by Chinese Taipei to help in Olympics, they're represented by Chinese Taipei because they can't fly the official flag. I guess China is just because China kind of painted itself into a corner a little bit with the whole you have to respect Taiwan. The Taiwan situation, and not Taiwan, because I guess one way of I guess what we're asking for is like an off ramp for China to normalize relations with Taiwan, and I'm guessing the prick's wet dream would be for Taiwan to be so economically and diplomatically isolated and crushed that they would invite Xi Daddy to be president of Taiwan as well. But
just come into my loving embrace.
Just come into my loving embrace.
Come to Daddy Xi. It's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll silence your thoughts about democracy and whatnot. And sorry, non-communist approved democracy. You can have communist approved democracy, just not communist approved democracy. And I guess the other way would be if they had a new leader who was more disposable, who was like, oh yeah, like a faction within the Communist Party would be like, oh yeah, you're the leader of China, acknowledge Taiwan's independence, and then they do that, and then they would dispose of that leader, like say leader X. Sorry, not leader X, leader Y. Then like leader Y would be like, oh yeah, Taiwan's an independent country, we'll normalize relations, and then we just like he would just be the scapegoat for the Communist Party, and then the Communist Party would save face by just like being like, oh, leader Y allowed this happen, this was a disaster, and then they would like remove leader Y and install a new leader that was like, okay, well, we had no choice. Leader Y messed up, and so that's kind of like, I guess they're off. I guess that would be their off ramp to save space and hold on to power. Would be to have a new leader step in, have that new leader acknowledge Taiwan's independence and the reality of things, and then dispose of him neatly in a vote of no confidence or something.
Yes. This actually makes me think of something else that's kind of like not related to what we were talking about at the moment, but more related to saving face at the beginning.
Yeah.
And this is something I want to touch on because this is very important.
Sure.
And it's something you joke about in the live chat all the time.
Okay.
Which is the mandate of heaven. Okay. This is very important. So I think, well, can you explain what the mandate of heaven is for those who don't know?
Okay, so for those who don't know, the mandate of heaven is this ancient thing, ancient mandate that was passed on, that was invented out of thin air when the last rulers of the Shang Dynasty were deposed by the Zhou Dynasty. The Shang Dynasty was the ruling dynasty of China for like 400 years, give or take. And when they were deposed, the Zhou dynasty had to invent a reason as to why they had to be deposed. And this was so 1600 BCE, so like Bronze Age era. I want to say it's contemporaneous with the Assyrian Empire. And so it's just this very old concept. And it basically means if your people are fed, if there are no floods, if your country is prospering, then heaven has given you the right to rule over all under heaven. And when you don't have it, you'll know when you don't have it, which is floods, disease, war, famine, and restlessness within the population. And every single dynasty has been deposed because they lost the mandate of heaven. What would happen sometimes is Chinese warlords would not claim that they have the mandate of heaven. They would say that, oh, we're just holding on to this territory and all of its taxes and its citizens for safekeeping until the true inheritors of the mandate of heaven comes, because they want to sit on the sidelines and see who wins, and that way they can be on the winning side, instead of just being like, oh, I'm the new emperor of China, I'm beginning a new dynasty. Because the minute they start doing that, they would automatically mark themselves as a target, because they'll be like, oh yeah, so that just gives the other warlords the right to gang up on you and split your tax revenues, because you just declared yourself an emperor. You're not supposed to do that yet. So it's a lot have to do with timing and this intricate dance of allies and nations and power and whatnot. And so
I think go ahead.
So I guess the KMT said that, so here's the thing. An important thing happened in 1911 was the deposition of the last emperor of China. And so they don't technically have the mandate. The mandate of heaven is technically a quasi-religious term, where you will feel heaven's wrath. But now it's more of like a people's mandate, like, oh, the people have cried out for democracy. And so Sun Zongsan, or Sun Yat-sen, created the Republic of China, which was supposed to democratize China and remove like the age-old stuff. But and then when the People's Republic of China took over, they had the popular support of the peasants. The people just liked communism more than they liked the nationalists, because the nationalists were assholes. There are YouTube channels who are like, go out of their way and be like, oh man, if only the nationalists won the Civil War. No, they were authoritarian assholes. The communists won because they had popular support. And so I joke about the mandate of heaven, but it's technically an abolished term, because the communists and nationalists wanted to paint China as this new, secular, enlightened nation who don't fall prey to the
superstitions.
Don't fall prey to superstitions. But I guess China is dealing with a lot of floods due to climate change in the south.
This is what I wanted to talk about. Yes. So there was brutal flooding last summer. Like, we don't know how many people died, because the government claimed a total of 51. But if you look at the footage in certain specific areas in different cities, it's impossible that only 51 people died. There was a tunnel that went under the city where there are like thousands of cars within that tunnel at rush hour, and it was rush hour. And the entire tunnel filled above the tunnel within like 5 minutes, literally. And so, but only 51 people died.
Only 51.
Yeah. And so people were talking about this flood and how horrible it is. And then also the Chinese government has gone to great lengths to censor real information and cover up how bad this flood was, even within, the province or the country at large, let alone internationally. And people, because I watch various like YouTube channels about China, but there are foreigners who live there and then are talking about their perspectives now. So I feel like it's very different, and they have a bias. And they are talking about, well, part of the reason for this very intense censorship is because of they have a great desire to not lose the mandate of heaven. And so their impulse to save face is it's twofold or multiple fold. It's not just, the tradition or cultural standard of saving face in general. It's partially that, but it's also to maintain their authority broadly and to maintain this veneer of the mandate of heaven at large. What do you think about how, these floods and other just natural disasters are playing into saving face and the mandate of heaven?
So, so there's two aspects to this. One is that some Chinese people are still superstitious, and there are also a lot of more educated Chinese people who are like, hey, this doesn't have anything to do with the mandate of heaven. It's just that these bureaucrats are incompetent. And so so I guess I just have to get this off of my chest. There was this Fox News thing about America versus China, and in America, in the thumbnail, America had the U.S. Capitol building. In China, had a temple to heaven, and I'm just like, the F are you doing? Like, why are you using the Temple of Heaven? China has a Congress. China has one of the largest congressional buildings in the world. Why aren't you using that as an image? Why are you choosing to use this tourist attraction as an image? Because the Temple to Heaven is a tourist attraction. We don't use it for civil ceremonies. And it was just like this attempt this attempt to make China look more uncivilized and superstitious and like pagan and foreign to the American audience. And it just kind of inflames me a little bit. Like, yes, there are aspects of China that are superstitious, and then there are aspects of China where that's very modern. And racists would pick the superstitious part to be racist, and um, Chinese ultra nationalists would pick the modern parts and only the modern parts to make China look more advanced and technologically supreme. But back to your original point about how China wants, how it might play into the mandate of heaven. I'm guessing communist China just wants to have all their bases covered because, like, yes, this not only is this a huge loss of life, but this is also huge economic disruptor. It's also slowing down the development of the interior provinces. So my family's from coastal provinces. We have I've heard people who talked about how they want China to break it apart into small little countries so they can all develop, like Europe, and slowly develop together over time. But they don't talk about how that overwhelmingly favors the coastal elites, because right now most of the Chinese interior is their development and infrastructure is paid for by coastal taxes. Like, the taxes from the coast are redistributed by communism to the Chinese interior to develop them. So, like, one, China wants to increase its economy like all nations do, and the other part is this is happening in the Chinese South. So, like, southern China is currently more wet than northern China, and so they want to build these. There's already a canal that was built in the Sui Dynasty that's like 1,000 kilometers long, connecting southern China to northern China, and they're trying to build more canals, linking the Yangtze River to the Yellow River, so they can somehow transport more water from the Chinese South to the Chinese North. Let me see if I can show you.
That sounds like a huge undertaking.
It is a huge undertaking. It's but like the thing is, we did it before the Industrial Revolution, so like
I know that's what's freaking crazy. I mean, you said that they pressed like over 100,000 servants into doing this. So
yeah. So okay, so they want to build this. I'm not sure if you can see it that well, but it's like right here. So one of the reasons why this is so difficult is because it's right here in the Tibetan Plateau, which is like a few thousand kilometers above sea level. I'm not entirely sure how many kilometers, but it's basically a lot. So there's already an existing one, the one right here and the one right here, and they want to connect these two, like the Yellow River here and the Yangtze River here. So they want to slow down flow, like right at the source and into the Yellow River, because water prices, like China is subsidizing water prices in northern China, because if they allow water prices to go higher, it basically saying, what's the fucking point of what's the point of communism? Like communism is supposed to make everyone equal, but like we're not having access to water, and so it's going to start huge riots. So part of their plan is to build this massive canal. Like, it doesn't look that big, but it's huge, and especially over mountainous terrain. Oh yeah, so this is the Grand Canal built in the Sui Dynasty. So yeah.
Wow. It makes me think about how I watched a really interesting video some time ago about that basically argued that China doesn't have the ability to leave communism behind because the coastal cities are essentially, they have to subsidize all of the Western provinces. Like, if you looked at some of the Western provinces or areas individually, they have the same GDP as like Sudan.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's highly dependent on the coastal regions. It was very, very interesting.
Yeah, was it by Caspian Report?
Yes, I think it was.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I also saw that one, and I guess it just go. Okay. So one of the other reasons why racism doesn't make any sense is because uh, even if we were to everyone to be the same, like China is 92% Han ethnicity, but we have so many smaller, pointless okay, not pointless, but like subdivisions within the Han ethnicity. So like we coastal people look down on people in the interior, and the interior people are like, we're good, communist loving, common people of the soil. We farm for a living. We're like good, hardworking Confucianists. Okay, all you dirty coastal capitalists do is move money around and
The coastal elites. It's
Yeah,
always the coastal
you
elites.
coastal elites are inventing money out of thin air. You don't know what it's like to work on a tea farm in the mountains of Yunnan. And then coastal elites are just like, well, you're dirty peasants, so I don't know what to tell you. One of the sayings in China is like 天不怕地不怕就怕广东人说普通话. I fear not the wrath of heaven. I fear not the beasts of earth. I only fear a Cantonese person speaking Mandarin. And yeah, and it's just like,
Oh my god.
yeah, and I take offense to it because my dad's Cantonese, but I don't actually speak any Cantonese. But point being is, we like, even if you were to be I guess a mono-ethnic society, you're still going to invent new subdivisions within that mono-ethnic society and then have pointless dick measuring contests about why this region is slightly better than that other region. So
Yeah. We're not so different after all. We
Yeah, we're not
also
so
construct differences for no good reason.
yeah, same.
Oh my gosh. Well, shoot, this was like so informative. I learned so much. Secular Rarity is saying, okay, seriously, Asian America needs to come back on and talk about more stuff. Yes, I agree. Like, so interesting. I'm literally gonna go like watch this back so I can like absorb what you had to share again, because there's a lot of historical stuff. Like I took a Chinese history class in high school, but I mean obviously that was like 10 years ago, but also it didn't, I don't remember the imperial history as much. I remember, you know, the fall of the Qing Dynasty and the more contemporary history. And so like all the information you shared was like really informative. There is 2 more live chat questions that I want to take.
Sure.
So, first one is more in line with what we were talking about, and I'm going to interpret Blank Name's question a little bit. So
Okay.
Blank Name is asking similarities between Ukraine situation versus Taiwan, Putin and Xing's view of their history. I think what he's referring to is Putin has put forth his belief, you know, that Ukraine is Russia, belongs to Russia. It is not a legitimate state. And you know, like this is part of our land. This is our brother and they belong to us. We're bringing them back home. And do you think she shares the same view of, like, say, Taiwan?
I would say yes, because because Taiwan was only settled during the Ming Dynasty. So like for 3,000 years of Chinese history, we did not even know Taiwan existed. Like it wasn't until the 1600s, like massive amounts of Chinese and Portuguese people started entering Taiwan. But that's also like me being an actual historian who cares about history and the facts of history, whereas China, I guess China also wants this because they want Taiwan as like Taiwan is technically a threat to Chinese military sovereignties. Like say for example, if Cuba suddenly decided to enter into a military alliance with with China, the U.S. would literally shit their pants, and like we would literally shit our pants if, you know, China was like, hey, let's start a new new Soviet Union or whatever, a union of the communists. But I'm guessing they're just using. I'm not sure if she believes in it, but I would say that they have a military reason for wanting Taiwan back, and they're just using history as a way to justify it.
That makes sense. Like it would always be within their interest to have control of this land. And
Yeah.
okay, that makes sense. The other live chat question is taking us in a little bit of a different direction, and I don't know how knowledgeable you are about this,
Okay.
but so PK is saying 3 Chinese teachers were recently killed by a I'm going to use some coded language, by a self-deletion explosion. And they were killed by a self-deletion explosion in Pakistan. Chinese have long been targeted in Balochistan as well. How long will China put up with this? So this is alluding to the larger issues that China is facing as it tries to implement some of its Belt and Road Initiative within China. Some of it is within the the highly contested Baluch territory, which is actually subject to apparently the longest current insurgency, like the longest ongoing insurgency. And the Chinese, unfortunately, are frequently explicitly targeted by terrorists, as we say here.
Yes, terrorists.
There we go. Do you have any thoughts on this?
So the prick would put up with it for as long as it's economically beneficial to them. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think is Karachi within Balochistan or is it in Sindhudesh?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I think this recent attack happened in Karachi, but a lot of the more ongoing stuff happened like more firmly in Baluch territory. People who are more familiar with the geography and live chat, please correct us.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a part of Sindh. So I'm just like looking from Googling. So yeah, China will put up with it for as long as it's economically beneficial to them. At some point, they're going to run out of teachers and engineers who are willing to volunteer themselves in such dangerous territory, and they'll stop. But in terms of how will China ever reprimand Pakistan for allowing this to happen, that is a different question. Maybe. I'm not sure, but I guess they'll just give Pakistan harsh words, and Pakistan also loses a lot of face for allowing this to happen, because it's like, yeah, these were our guests who were trying to invest in us, and we allowed them to be hurt. So
yeah, that's a huge problem as well. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Also, China needs Pakistan to keep India in check, so they're gonna put up with a lot. So 3 teachers isn't gonna really do anything. I mean,
but this isn't the first time. They were going after their embassies and like consulate officials like a year and a half ago, like that's a lot higher stakes.
True, but do they have nuclear family members in the CCP Politburo? That's the question. And if the answer is no, then it's going to be deprioritized.
It's all about the inside family, huh?
Yeah, it's all about the inside nuclear family.
At first, I thought you were talking about nuclear arms.
No, God.
It's like that too. No. Cool. No. Well, did you have anything else that you wanted to talk about today? Like any slides that you missed or thoughts that you wanted to share?
I guess no. Okay, I guess I'll just share this one last one, or it's just literally Chinese linguistic diversity. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, so this is Inner Mongolia. This is Xinjiang area. This is the Tibet Qinghai region, and so this is Mandarin, like right here. So Singaporeans, they are part of the Hakka Han Chinese, right? This is all technically Han Chinese, but we just break it up. And my mother's side of the family is from Shanghai, and Shanghainese is the preeminent dialect of the Wu language. And my father's side of the family is from here, which is Cantonese, and Cantonese is the preeminent dialect of the Yue language. So it's kind of like how Parisian French is the standard for French versus like other dialects of French, like Haitian Creole or Quebecan French. So yeah, and this is the other interior parts of Han Chinese. Oh, also Taiwan is also 98% Han Chinese, mostly from the Min and Hakka varieties of Han Chinese. So one of the other reasons why I don't think they'll invade is because China would literally see other Chinese people die. Like these are not, pardon my French, Tibetans and Uyghurs and Mongolians. These are our fellow Han Chinese who look like us, who are going to be caught in a crossfire.
Interesting.
So yeah.
Wow. You've given me so much to think about. Well,
Yay, awesome.
Amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. And sometime soon, I want to take you up on, I'm going to leave it as a teaser because Asian American also on Patreon, guys, you can support us on Patreon, link in the description, and reach out to us in our inbox and talk about things that you would like us to cover. And Asian American has sent us numerous very interesting topics of discussion. You had a lot more that you wanted to talk about in terms of mythology. That was like, oh, this is so juicy. And like Taoist magic structures. And I'm like, oh my God, tell me more. So be sure to reach out to us, support us on Patreon. If you like what we do, if you want to support our work, it's because people support our work that we're able to keep doing it. And so thank you, Asian American. I get to tell you to your face. Thank you for being a patron. And thank you for talking with me today. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no problem. Me too. I also it's also like part of my effort to, I guess, demystify China, because a lot of people like are, I guess, doomsayers would be like, China is this thing that we can't possibly comprehend. And Chinese people sometimes play into it, and it's like, yeah, of course they're beyond your understanding. Like, we're basically gods. Who are you? You inferior culture. Like, your culture isn't even 1,000 years old. Is it even valid?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. I think it is somewhat more difficult to get a handle or understanding of what some of these different concepts or conceptualizations are, because there's such a big language barrier too. So thank you for breaking through, that the Great Wall, the firewall, that cultural wall.
That cultural wall. Build bridges, not walls.
Yes. Oh, this is such a sweet comment from D. D is saying, I love that we have people that are so into history and politics. Thanks to Asian American for sharing.
Aw, thank you, D.
And Secular Rarity is saying, # more of Asian American, please.
Aww.
Well, yes. Everyone in the live chat, please remember to like this video, share this video. And, if there's people who want to learn some more about these topics, I think this would be a great, very chill, casual way to learn. And yes, I will see everyone on the Q&A in 2 days. And so until then, signing off.
Bye.
Bye.